there's a conversation about how do we get really present, right? If we really want the messages to come through, if we really want to understand who we are, perhaps our ancestors, like if we want to be connected, then how do we do that? I know that it's like, it looks great on Instagram. It can be sexy or athletic or hard or there's 100 things we can unpack about the scientific and physiological benefits of cold. But to me, the most important thing is that actually there is an intentional ability for you to get with yourself fully present when you're in the cold. It's not just the science of it, but there's a soulfulness that comes with doing cold exposure. And I think sometimes it gets lost in the mission, right? Take some time with yourself to feel into how present you can actually be by using your breath, setting yourself up for success, creating maybe like a little ritual with some music on or something, and then getting into the cold water to experience a level of yourself and presence that perhaps you haven't experienced before, especially in a heightened stressful state. We're getting to center ourselves and calm as best as we possibly can. And there's a shift that happens, I think, in our belief system, and a definite shift that happens when people have physiological and mindset connected in that moment, that they get out of the ice tub and they start to make all these big changes in their lives. And they start thinking differently and feeling differently and understanding who they were born in this world to be.
Hey guys, in this episode of Elevated Conversations, we interview Kristen Weitzel from the States. We met her in California last year. She's doing great work. Her business is called Sherpa. She focuses on cold plunge, breath work, and other modalities like psilocybin mushrooms and MDMA. We dive deep into the three modalities today to learn everything that you need to know about elevating your consciousness, raising your vibration. She's a beautiful soul, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to Elevated Conversations.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Roxy. I'm stoked to be here with you.
and everyone, we've got the memo right. We're all in green and blonde hair today, so matchy.
I love it.
Wardrobe's on point. So, Kristen, tell us, how did you get into this work that you're doing? In particular, firstly, at the beginning of maybe an opening into or an awakening, or the ice bath, cold plunge, breath work. How did you get into all of this?
Yeah, so I won't go back so far as my like earlier days doing like nutrition and learning breath work through the yogis and things like that, which was a bit of the origin of my story, really understanding how to be in the best physical shape while taking care of myself and eating, which a lot of young girls were not doing very much of when I was younger in the dance community. But when I look at nervous system regulation and I think about breath work and understanding my being and cold exposure, I can talk specifically about working with a few mentors in the breath space, in the cold space, and specifically with cold, working with like Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese. I went to an event that they had over a whole weekend. So Australians probably know who are listening, and some Americans that Laird Hamilton is a big wave surfer, like pretty retired now, but still like crazy, like a 14-year-old kid riding the waves. And Gabby, his wife, was a pro volleyball player. So they were very into like extreme sport and really stretching the window of tolerance and understanding breath and cold and heat. And I had been navigating sort of Korean spas and Russian and Turkish bathhouses, and as a yogi who was feeling into all the breath work I could to regulate my system or to be a better yogi, right? Having a better practice, holding poses longer. I wanted to discover even more of that. And I was always coaching people around the health space. And so when I went to Laird and Gabby's, there was a distinctive moment where I really realized that they're doing all this physical training and fitness, and they have a lot of professional athletes around. And I was like, oh, all of these people are just stronger, better, faster than me, right? They're professional surfers, they're athletes. I'm not going to be able to keep up with them when we have 40-pound weights in the bottom of 11 feet in a pool. And we're trying to do all these like exercises. I was definitely the weakest link. And so I made a commitment to myself, and it was sort of a really great life lesson that I said, okay, tomorrow we're doing cold and heat. And I already like it and know something about it, but I'm going to show up tomorrow and I'm going to be the best person in the space, right? So a little competitive side, a little ego there, but also I was like, this is a space I can hold my own. Like, and I didn't really know if I could hold my own to that level until I tried, but I went home and I visualized and I thought about it and I planned it. And there was like no doubt in my mind by the time I showed up to do cold. And I said, I'm going to get into the ice bath. I'm going to head dunk on the in. I'm going to stay in for 3 minutes. I'm going to do a head dunk on the way out. And I'm going to do it like a Zen master for all these tough, it was probably 90% men, right? All these super tough, really strong, athletic men, because we watch each other. So I'm like, let me dive in that way. And then I actually did. I went first. It sort of went exactly as I planned, which life doesn't always go that way. But I really learned this lesson about it's about the approach, right? And having a visualization and where your mindset is. Because as I came up from like the second dunk, right before I came out of all this huge tub of ice, the athlete guys were all standing around. I could see the expressions on their faces like, whoa, I was like making up for the day before. Like, oh, we didn't know she was like so strong, but like, look what she's doing. Now we have to do this just as good as her or maybe better, you know? So there was this beautiful moment that I got out of the tub. I knew that I had this capacity. And I just said, these are the practices I'm going to lean into within the health landscape where I work. And I immediately talked to Laird, got into their courses, met Patrick McEwen, plenty of other people. I started working with Casper Vandermeulen in Amsterdam around breath. And it just was like a skyrocket moment from there. I just knew that it was like my peak expression.
And what year was that?
That was almost 9 years ago now.
Wow. So,
I was
wow.
like the weirdo doing ice baths when people would write me DMs on Instagram. I did like a 30-day in a row challenge before anyone was doing that, like before many people were even
Mm,
thinking about cold exposure. And people would write me DMs like, "Are you okay?
yeah, totally.
What are you doing this for? Is
And
this safe?"
now nearly every gym is doing it. It's like 9 years ago when you broke that market and learned that skill, it would have been very different, very, very
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
So, what made you think, okay, now I'm going to go into coaching and I'm going to help people see this? Was it just that you knew there was the inner knowing that you had a gift and this was kind of feeling good for you, or?
Yeah, I mean, I originally was like in the corporate arena 15, 20 years ago, like working a corporate job and all of that. But all throughout my corporate career, I was coaching specifically women and through juice cleanses and nutritional things. I became a nutritional specialist, a nutrition specialist. I went and I got certified to be a yoga teacher. I was living in New York City teaching yoga classes and just supporting people's bodies and their healing and their energy. I would like go to work in the morning as early as I could. I'd get out as early as I could, and then I'd run around. Almost my other colleagues would make fun of me, like, "Where are you going to teach yoga? Are you going to?" Because I was launching spirits brands and Red Bull and all these other things. So there's a little bit of that, like I was the odd woman out. I was kind of doing moonlighting a little bit, but just really working with people, coaching them. And then at some point, I just decided, like, what do I want my legacy to be? I want my legacy to be that I got more people to drink Dom Perignon than any other marketing woman in the world, maybe. But really, when I'm 80 years old and I'm like, going into my twilight years, what do I want to be remembered for? What do I want my family to know that I've done to change the world? And it wasn't about getting more beverages or cocktails in people's hands. It was like, how can I heal people? So I just took a very hard left turn and said, okay, I'm going to leave and go full time into health coaching and really working with people as an entrepreneur, which I thought my family would be surprised about. But most of my family and friends were like, it's about time. We've been watching you do all these weird things on the side, and we know that this is what you love.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
odd one out is like the big bird, the meme, the big bird amongst the matrix. I'm just seeing that like in New York City, like this yogi just like stretching the limits with your work colleagues. So tell us all about now cold and hot exposure. So I know a few of our listeners would be educated on the benefits, but I know
Yeah.
that there's some of us that haven't touched into these different modalities before. So we want to kind of get really deep on the cold first and maybe then move into the breath work.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into the cold for sure. I think, I know that you guys talk a lot on the show, and just from getting to know you and Pete, that there's a conversation about how do we get really present, right? If we really want the messages to come through, if we really want to understand who we are, perhaps our ancestors, like if we want to be connected, then how do we do that? And I think the one thing I want to say, or the first thing I want to say about cold is I know that it's like it looks great on Instagram. It can be sexy or athletic or hard there's 100 things we can unpack about the scientific and physiological benefits of cold. But to me, the most important thing is that actually there is an intentional ability for you to get with yourself fully present when you're in the cold, like almost nothing else I've ever experienced, right? So there is a if I were to say, it's not just the science of it, but there's a soulfulness that comes with doing cold exposure. And I think sometimes it gets lost in the mission, right? There's plenty of people doing this at gyms, and this is no slight on them. Like, do it with your friends, have fun, and party around it. But also try doing it with just one friend or a coach or solo if that's safe for you. Please don't solo plunge in the outdoors of nature. But take some time with yourself to feel into how present you can actually be by using your breath, setting yourself up for success, creating maybe like a little ritual with some music on or something, and then getting into the cold water to experience a level of yourself and presence that perhaps you haven't experienced before, right? Especially in a heightened stressful state, we're getting to center ourselves and calm as best as we possibly can. And there's a shift that happens, I think, in our belief system, and a definite shift that happens when people have physiological and mindset connected in that moment, that they get out of the ice tub and they start to make all these big changes in their lives, and they start thinking differently and feeling differently and understanding who they were born in this world to be. So that sounds like a big thing for a 3-minute ice bath, but it's not just me. I've put 5,000 people one-on-one in the cold water, in ice tubs, in wild swimming holes, and I've seen it time and time again, especially like with female entrepreneurs and people who are, struggling, saying, how do I get to the next frequency, the next level of my being? And I think there's a big pathway there forward through cold.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I remember the first time I tried it, we went over to a friend's house. There was only a couple of people there. And that point of, you know, limiting the amount of people around you because of our, self-consciousness of and our confidence of doing it to, outsmart or show off to people that are watching us, or just having us in the presence of our soul can be very beneficial. And it's tough getting in the water for the first time. So I remember doing it at a friend's house and I only got through to 1 minute.
Mm-hmm.
I jumped out and I just felt so proud of myself that I got that far, and that was beautiful. And
Yeah.
look, I didn't connect in with I just was on the breath, just breathing to get in there. And then I slowly we got a deep freezer here on our back veranda. Pete and I, $350, 350, I don't know, liters. And we just filled it up and we started doing it daily, and obviously isolated by ourselves. I had some major breakthroughs with the cold exposure, things, past lives breaking through, knowings, visions coming to me, even just the soul having to be here in an uncomfortable situation in the body. We often, as you know, you would see this all the time. Our soul splits and we go out of body to cope. It's a coping mechanism because it's
Yeah.
overwhelming in the body. So the ice bath for me was very much grounding my soul back in and talking with that energy to allow this process of being embodied and human in the physical. Have you
Yeah. Really like
client?
presencing your consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it's like surrendering to get out of your head. That was the main thing that I learned. These thoughts, you have nowhere to run but in the body to move through the discomfort, right? Have you had clients have breakthroughs like that, major breakthroughs and knowings? Because the past life one for me, Pete had to get me out of the ice bath. I was in a process, a major process, and it was the cold water and the remembrance of cold water and drowning in a cold environment. It was a similar boat sinking like the Titanic, wasn't the Titanic, in a past life. And that just triggered and brought all of this energy up and out of me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's, I work with a range of clients from professional athletes to people who are like, hey, I'm on a journey of navigating anxiety, depression, fat loss, whatever it might be. And also like a range of belief systems, right? So there are clients that I work with that, like, we know scientifically that we're going to carry generational cellular patterning through, 7 generations of our body and our tissues and what we're taking genetically in at a cellular level. So we know that that exists, even if I work with some people that are like, I don't know about past life. I don't know about regression. I don't know about trauma. I don't know. Like, we know that there's enough science to kind of piece together that there are reasons that memories could come up that we don't know if that we had in our specific lifetime. And also plenty of people coming up with really rediscovering who they are or remembering something that, like, from their childhood or from some other experience. Now, I will also say that if people have water trauma in their life, meaning they had a near drowning experience or something, that will almost always come up. Some kind of abuse in the water, something that does come up because of course you're getting in water. And so I'm always, this is why I was talking to you about off camera about being trauma informed and understanding how to work with the somatic body, because we're always navigating and negotiating what is present for us. And that might be the right here and now. And that might be the like time is a construct and I'm present, but I'm present with another really big story that's here that I want to bear witness to. You know, when I get in the cold, many times when I'm alone, I'll just speak out loud what's happening in my body, just like, or I'll know that I'm being hard on myself, or I know I'm not being kind to someone, or no, I just, those things will bubble up where I need to take action and also just take better care of myself potentially, right? You're not celebrating yourself enough, things like that. And it's almost like someone else is like speaking to me, but it's coming from me. And so many people will have instances and experiences like that. And then also there's a lot of times that I'm sitting with someone and coaching them. And because I'm reading what's going on in the nervous system and they're, you know, people are so present with themselves, but many times as a coach, you need to be like right there, staying in it with them, because we do have this shock response when we get in the cold and we have to breathe ourselves in, and people's innate nervous system response to high levels of stress comes up. So it's my job as a coach to get people more balanced and to be in that presence so they can kind of see those pictures you're talking about, think through things that are coming up for them. And if they, for some reason, slightly disassociate or they're a little bit in fight or flight or freeze, then I have the opportunity to, when they get out and they've gone through a shiver and calmed down into parasympathetic again, I will say to them quite often, can I speak freely about what I saw in the ice bath? And then I will have a conversation with them, which is my way of working to try to like, you know, create a little bit more of a therapeutic container, although I'm not a therapist, but just to say, this is what I saw in a heightened state of stress. Because when they get into stress modes, or perhaps other versions of them, or other, you know, ancestral components of the cellular body are getting into stress, they're repeating patterns from the past. And we want to make sure that they can pattern interrupt those if those are not serving them.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like you see clients, you know, I had one yesterday and just the overwhelm and the pressure of having to pack a bag and go away for the weekend, for example.
Mm.
And I saw this lady's light body all frantic. It was almost like she was going to the hospital to have a baby. And I was like, what is going on? You know, that energy. It was like,
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I worry that I'm going to forget something. And that's how she walks nearly every single day to work. And so
Yeah.
once we spotted the energy, like, and so the feedback from you after an ice bath would be amazing for clients, because it's like insights to why, okay, this energy, this behavior is coming up, and where did it start and why is it happening over and over and over? And our consciousness can't see it sometimes because our ego blocks it. And
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, her just seeing that I saw that was like, okay, I'm going to slow down tomorrow morning and just go and flow and trust that everything's going to be okay. And if I forget something, it's fine. I'll figure out something else, you know. But we're so conditioned. So I find that the ice bath would bring that for people as well. And so with anxiety, because a lot of people have overwhelm, and I try to use the word overwhelm rather than anxiety,
Yeah.
because it's just a little bit like more non-label in mainstream, and it feels like it's an emotion rather than a symptom or a condition.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so do you find that people, after doing cold therapies with you a few times, their stress and overwhelm has settled down?
Yeah, so when we look at the physiological responses in the body, and there's plenty of evidence-based research to support understanding the catecholamines and the different neurochemistry that the body goes through when it's in cold water, as the heart rate shifts, if we have mammalian dive reflex happening in the body, and then what happens to the body from a neurochemical perspective, with like bliss chemicals being released when we get out of the ice bath or a body of cold water. So quite often the conversation. And I love that you say overwhelm in other ways to talk about anxiety. What I always say to anyone who's like listening or watching this later is, if instead of saying I have anxiety this morning, or like I am anxious, which is like a very big label of a condition on you, and your cells in your body are listening, right?
Mm,
I might say, well, I ran out of water and it's a really hot day, so I have some anxiousness around not having enough water, right? So that then it takes it outside of you, and it's more of a temporary condition than something you're continuing to remind yourself of.
mm,
So using words are, words are magic, the words are spells. So watching how we speak about those kinds of things that are going on in the body. And then also anyone who's navigating, and again, if you're working with a doctor or a therapist, like keep doing that, like, right, navigating big states of anxiety or big states of feeling anxious or depressed, we know that we can shift our state without medication just by getting into cold water. We can even shift our state with breath, but it is the great equalizer, because you get into a body of cold water, you're going to get an energetic boost. Of course, you'll have a little shock response. You breathe well through it. You get an energetic boost from the like adrenaline, the noradrenaline, which is the same as epinephrine and norepinephrine. You're going to get oxytocin. We know the stats of 350% plus, dopamine hit versus before you're in the ice bath. People say it's more than cocaine, it's like, but you get a bunch of dopamine, you get oxytocin, especially when you're doing it with other people, which is like the love chemical. And then as you get out of the ice bath, you have this parasympathetic response, right? Where your body is like, I survived, because it doesn't know you were doing it deliberately. And then everything sort of has a calmer, chill, like heightened state of focus, but still you're like more calm, more chill, being able to get out of the ice bath, and your body's almost celebrating, and you feel alive and you feel happy or joy. You may like, I have big executives from Hollywood producing multi-million-dollar budget films who are stoic, and then they get out of the ice bath and they're like singing show tunes on my rooftop. When I was initially coaching, it was like on the rooftop of my LA condo. And it's just amazing to see, right? And it's such an honor to be able to coach and bear witness to that. And you see so much of this in the people you're working with, because we get the honor of watching someone step back into their like 11-year-old self, their 15-year-old self, this like authentic, truest version of them, and be like, wow, it's like a mirror into their life as a younger person, as a child, or as in their most playful state. And I just think, I mean, why wouldn't I know it can be hard to get out of the bed in the morning sometimes when you're having a tough time and you're feeling overwhelmed.
Mm.
And if there's any access that anyone has, even just as simple as a cold shower for a short period of time, it can really change the game on how we feel.
That's so beautiful, because you just reminded me we haven't done any ice baths this year since seeing you in
Mhm.
LA last year, and I'm like, I need to get back in the ice bath, like
It's time. It's time. Yeah.
winter here. So I'm like, oh, but so it's great. The idea of the fresh feeling that you get when you come out of the ice bath is something that you saw Pete and I experience when we were with you. And
Mhm.
you got us to dunk our heads, which I don't normally do because obviously girl hair, I've washed it
Yeah.
last night or whatever. So I never have done that. And so when I did that, it felt like like a rebirth. And it's
Hmm.
interesting because I am in a big major rebirth process, and I was sitting in meditation this morning thinking about when I felt like I had a rebirth in the water. And it's funny that we're talking to you today because it's all the synchronicities lining up for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really recommend a dunk, and that's simply, Kristen, a dunk under the water at the end of, say, a 3 to 5 minute ice bath. What would you say is the best recommended time for an ice bath for someone that's limited on time, but wants to get the best out of something, to overcome overwhelm, maybe some stress,
Yeah.
feel alive again?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I love what you said earlier, that you're like, I did a minute and it was like, I got out and I was so proud of myself, because the number one thing is that you feel successful. That whatever time you decide to get in for, as you're committing to it and you stick to it and you get it, you get there or close, you're successful. But I would say for the average human who's in generally good health, who isn't navigating any contraindications and all of that, that anyone can do about 2 minutes. I would even say three. I put most people in for three when I'm coaching. Sometimes when we're alone, we're like a little bit more like, 1, 2 minutes, that's enough. But and I would say, like, especially in your temperature thermometer down there, like looking about like 6 degrees Celsius. I don't know, under 10 for sure, but like 4 to 6 degrees Celsius would be like sweet spot, which is like 40, 42 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not exactly the same because who can do the math on those
Yeah.
things, but and like 2 to 3 minutes, like that's you can work yourself up to that. And women who are hearing a lot of the fodder about women should go in warmer temperatures or it's not good for women. I mean, that's a
Mm.
blanket generalization. That's not true across the board, but females with hormone dysregulation or other things going on could start a bit warmer. And by warmer, I just mean 5 degrees, 7 degrees, not like in the 60s or not, anything too warm, but really just a little bit warmer. And then working them their way back down to that like 6 degree, 4 degree Celsius. And again, same with time. Start at 2 minutes if that's plenty for you. The number one thing for each individual, because I always say at Sherpa Breath and Cold, this my company, like context is king and safety is queen. We want you to be safe. And also, if you have a shiver response after you get out of the ice bath, it's probably an appropriate time and temperature for you. We want to have a shiver response happen in the body. We don't necessarily want it to be like a full shiver convulsatory in the tub. That's too long. At some point, it's diminishing returns. And I would say for anybody who's like new or even intermediate, like anything past 6 minutes is like a non-starter. You don't need to go longer than that.
Okay.
You might be like throwing down with your friends at the gym and competing and whatever, but at some point it's like going to actually be not great for your cells. So let's not go hyperthermic.
Mhm.
Let's not go
So,
hyperthermic. Yeah.
yeah, Pete's dad comes over for an ice bath, and well, he used to when we used to have it all off and running, and he'd sit in there for like 12 minutes and be so proud that he beat everyone. And we're like, it's probably not even doing anything, like
And then he's like, oh,
but I think
shivering.
it got very warm quickly because of the body heat,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. So,
let's move to breath work. Let's
mhm.
let's move to breath work because you do a beautiful breath work ceremony and you hold space for people in conjunction with the cold plunge. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I do. Not everywhere that I go is there available cold water or cold tubs and plunges. So quite often I'm doing nervous system regulation, working people through anxious states or feeling their feelings, maybe moving energy in the body of things that are stuck from their life, from their traumas, things coming up, where they might be feeling activated. And I do a lot of group work in the breath space, but some of my most favorite work is doing that breath before we go into cold, really sets the body up to be open and available to a wild and invigorating experience, let's say, right? That can be intense for some. So breath for me is the low-hanging fruit. And for anyone who's watching this, I know that you're breathing right now. And how much more work could it be? You already know how to breathe, and in many ways you do, because we have to every day to make energy. But the reality is learning how to biomechanically breathe well, learning how to breathe for your body and also breathe for the task at hand is ever so important and something we overlook a lot,
Mm,
especially when it comes to emotional states, right? And reacting versus responding. How do we really breathe into the system, understanding our somatic body, like our experience of being in this body, and taking enough time to do the thing that no one likes to do, which is slow down a little and be in some stillness to feel where the breath is in the body, how it's correlating to your feelings and emotions and thoughts. Because this is the money, right? About breath. Is like your breath is the stick shift to the car of your nervous system. And if we're creating changes in the nervous system based on the way that we breathe, what we're also changing is the way that we think. So how you breathe can be correlated to how you think or the thoughts or the mindset, whatever you want to phrase it as, that we have. And so why wouldn't we become masters of our breath? Because then we become masters of our, not just our body in many ways, but of our mindset and the way that we put our thoughts into the world. Because thoughts become things. Like more than anyone, more than many people on the planet, like what we believe is what we conceive. So we have to really work on that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what type of breath types? Because we did breath work before the cold plunge.
Hmm.
We were working with you in California. So that was really beautiful. Pete and I did a back-to-back breath, very simple, just breathing in through the nose, up through the neural pathways and signaling the brain. And I'm guessing that's
Yeah.
sending a signal down the vagus nerve to let your body know and your system know everything's okay. And
Yeah.
getting that breath deeper into the belly is key for some
Yeah.
breath types that you teach, right?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest thing people can practice for 60, 70% of their day when they're not talking or at the gym or activated and highly animated because they have to for work or life is really concentrating on, am I breathing out of my nose or my mouth? And how can I close my mouth, shut my mouth to save my life, we say sometimes, where it's like we know the mouth is for eating and the nose is really for the predominant breathing. So how can I nasal breathe for the better part of my day, in through the nose, out through the nose, which is going to do like what you said, it's going to, especially longer exhales out the nose, slow the heart rate, send a signal through the body, through the nervous system that things can be in rest, digest, socialize, have sex. We're a bit calmer, or maybe we're focused. And everyone's always like, we have sex in there. I'm like, yes, that's why
Oh,
we
that
have
was,
sex. So
I'm
everyone should be down
listening. What was
regulated.
that? Sex?
Exactly. So it's like, how do we get parasympathetic? That is like the down regulation part of the nervous system where we can be eyes are wide open, visions and creativity. We have some good oxygenation. We're like breathing through our nose into our lower belly. And all of that is this beautiful vagus nerve, which is cranial nerve 10, not to be nerdy. But it is what's most interesting about it, because we talk about the vagus nerve all over social media now, is that 80% of the fibers of the vagus nerve are afferent. So that means that 80% of them are going from it starts in like the neck area, works its way all the way down to like under the abdomen, our hips, and it's like 80% of that is information coming from the body to the brain, and only 20% is going the other way. So who do you think is driving, right? The body is really driving the vagus nerve. That is our pathway to understanding our system being safe or our system being chased by a tiger, if you will. So we really want to make sure that we're breathing nasally and that we're putting more nitric oxide in our system, because we make that in the sinus cavity, which then opens the capillaries in the blood vessels. So it slows your heart rate, long story short. And we are filtering the air. We're doing all these beautiful things with the nose that we don't do with the mouth. So I think that's the recommended advice for the day to day. And then the breathing that we did in LA was just a couple different sets with some music, mostly nasal breathing, a little bit of that mouth breathing. I remember we had a little emotional moment, where you're getting to move some emotion through the system. You're getting out of the prefrontal cortex by breathing yourself in a specific pattern. And when you're not in that rational mind, that like decision making, I have to be like this because society tells me so, and I have all these patterns, I'm going to stay in my story. When you get out of that prefrontal cortex and you open the mind's eye a bit, then their body can say, oh, what's going to come to the surface first? All the stuff that's like the cream on the top. And then you'll navigate and have some, maybe it's excitement or joy or tears, or, it could be a number of things, but then people really get to move that energy that might be in some stuckness or that needs to be moved in order for them to heal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't actually know key tip that you just gave there about the vagus nerve sending signals majority to the brain, not the other way around. And it would definitely make sense. And we talk a lot with our clients and students about the energy centers and compressed zip file energy stuck in the
Mhm.
body. And so the breath is a beautiful tool to gently like get those layers out. And there's plenty of layers. There's plenty of moments where we've suppressed and suppressed and suppressed and suppressed. And you think, oh my God, I forgot about that. But that affected me really deeply. And so it would
Yeah.
make sense that this body, this instrument is holding the distortion, and it has to be sent up for the learnings and the expansion of our consciousness, right? To release
Yeah.
because you got to feel it to
Yeah.
heal it, and you got to know the intelligence of why it happened and what you're learning, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that's beautiful. Thank you for opening that up. I think that you know, a lot of us probably should start the day with breath, even if it's a light breath, just expanding and giving ourselves some space to hear. And like that's what we do every morning. We sit and we just listen. And we're what
Hmm.
any messages, but Pete's been getting into a little bit more breath work and expanding there. But it's like fuel for the vehicle, isn't it? It's like the vehicle's not going to be, it's going to be backfiring all day if we didn't release that little pocket of energy or emotion, right? To keep the emotion in motion, right? And so this is great. I think we need you teaching all the schools around the world breath work.
Yeah, I mean, it's super helpful. And it's like there's a notion of moving energy, which is like a beautiful commitment that you're talking about. It's like there's something stuck in the space. How do we breathe into that? Of course, our lungs are where our lungs are, but energetically, we can breathe, open ourselves up, breathe well, biomechanically well. And
Mm.
that lends itself to all, like, even when I'm working with pro athletes, like we learn how to breathe well. That's not just, it's beautiful with athletes because they're holding so much stress, right? About could be things from their childhood to help move some of that through them, but they're also learning how to breathe specifically for their sport, their context, right? And it's when I work with like teams of swimmers, the big thing is if you save them they take one less breath across the lap of that pool, across the pool for that lap, that's going to mean faster times. And that's going to mean the difference between a win and a loss. So we can build our breath pattern and our breath, our understanding of how we use our breath from something as simple, like you just said, as doesn't have to be an hour long, I saw God type of moment. It can be a 5 minutes. Let me expand my system. Let me feel my energy space around me. Let me see if I'm connected to my loving family that might be here with me. Create some brief ritual, ground ourselves, focus ourselves with better oxygenation. And then we can go off into our day. It doesn't have to be a big deal every time.
Mm.
And it can be good for anyone who's like from a householder to a professional athlete. I mean, even the pro athletes, I'm teaching things that are like, this is a 5 minute thing you do every day that's going to change the way you oxygenate your system, right? So it's like there are so many different protocols or exercises that we use in each case that can direct a person to live more into the life of their dreams, right? So why not? If it's a mostly free tool beyond like hiring a breathwork coach, it's a mostly free tool that you can learn about.
Yeah. And I've been in plenty breathwork classes, safe containers, and it's important to have that safe container and a coach to hold space for you because you can reach limits of out of controlness and freezing hands, and I'm sure there's words for that, but and the
Yeah.
room can be moaning and it sounds very dark and dense because there is so much, we're all holding so much pain. And if we have a safe container to release it at the end of the week or the start of the week, we're going to go walk into the weekend all the week with a clearer consciousness. We're not carting it around on our back. So I would highly recommend breath work. But yeah,
Yeah.
don't be afraid
Yeah.
from your first session because it can sound pretty brutal. It sounds like a labor room sometimes in some breath work when people are going that hard, you know?
Yeah, and all different styles of breath too. So people can I always encourage people to try the buffet of offerings out there. And then yeah, to not I don't know at what point in our history of humankind we stopped feeling like it was okay to make sound or noise. And I think with women, just to generalize a slight bit, there's a bit of the apologizing in the room or not really speaking our fullest truth because we're wanting to like keep the community happy, keep the tribe all everybody in the collective feeling like we're all gathered together and we're here. But there's a notion of the holding that we all have as humans. And I do see this a lot with females, especially running big companies and things like that, that we're just not making noise in whatever way that might be, right? We're speaking up, speaking our truth. And so there's a practice that when you're in a breathwork class, even if you're having a little weep or you're having a little shout or you're having a little like giggle, it doesn't, however it's coming out, that we're actually like stepping more into the fullest expression of ourselves. And so it's like great practice for that. Because maybe that translates a little to the boardroom, right? You might not go in the boardroom and be like, oh, but you're going to go in the boardroom and say, I need to tell Tony that that report he just turned in is not acceptable. And then you can feel comfortable enough to say it kindly and actually speak it rather than just think it and then not,
Yeah.
not put it into the space of learning.
And have anger and fire in you when you say it.
Yeah.
Now you're a
Yeah.
bit
Yeah.
softer. You're like, Tony, you're fired.
You're like, I did an hour of breath work yesterday, and I just want to tell you with
Yeah.
so much kindness that that report was no good. Can we try again? Whatever happens.
I still love you, you know.
Yeah.
I love it. It's so funny. It's like those comedians on social media. You see them being the spiritual couple at an event or something. It's just so funny, some of the things that are
Yeah.
coming out nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's pivot to the recent journey of yours. You've been discovering MDMA therapy, and
Mhm.
I think a lot of our listeners would probably be interested in this one because, we've all gone through our 18 and early 20s years and, I'm sure had some funness in chemical form with the drinking and
Yeah.
dancing and carrying on. So I know that for me, I probably would be slow to take this therapy up only because of the up and the down experience in my early 20s with taking
Mhm.
pills and MDMA. And I'm sure it wasn't clean and crisp like the therapy nowadays. But what can you share with us about that journey that you've just come off the back of and looking to walk in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was just speaking earlier to Roxy about the last couple of years of going through some things, big challenges in my life that are the most beautiful opening to the future version of myself and having some more experience. I brought breath work and cold exposure for a number of years now into plant medicine circles, into, playing with these amazing molecules and in a therapeutic sense. I've used those tools and been around the different types of medicines. What I've found recently is working with people in containers, one on one and couples I've been working with, And I'm still using all the nervous system regulation tools that I have. I'm still using breath. I'm certainly not using cold while people are in medicine, MDMA, psilocybin, but I'm using these tools around it and for integration to support people's process in a very intentional therapeutic sense. So this is very different than when we were in our 20s and it was like recreational use and we had no idea and we were just
Yeah.
having a great time or dancing or whatever. I was doing a lot of that in Australia, ironically. Um, and then, years have gone by and I'm a health coach and like I've woven some microdosing into my own personal practice and done some microdosing protocols with clients who have called and said, hey, how do I do this well? And I've walked them through the steps and integration. But this really understanding that a lot of the epidemic of the world right now is like there is some anxiousness, there's a depression, there's loneliness, there's confusion, there's overwhelm in such a strong space that I want people to be able to step more into a holistic like love, right? As woo as that can sound, it's like really how do we love ourselves more? How do we love our families more and love our communities and just share that open-heartedness and vulnerability because this is how we all can rise together. And people need to feel safe that way. People need to be out of fear. And even with the dawn of AI, there's so much fear in the landscape.
Mm.
So working specifically with MDMA, number one, it ranks really low on the scale of long-term negative effects, lower than alcohol by a lot, lower than many types of drug classes, and the opportunity to get out of the amygdala when you utilize this medicine and get out of your fear center gives you some more capacity to really begin to unpack things. And so I'm working with IFS, internal family system style parts work, a little NLP to really sit with people in a very intentional container of 6 or so hours to be right there with them in the journey space. It's very different than when we were younger, and coaching them through that process and having them look at trials, tribulations, wins, challenges, future visioning, a lot of different components of the human psyche so that we can unpack the things that are really not serving us, right? Every part of us is going to have a superpower and a shadow. And so we need to make sure like we look at these parts and we want to make sure that the person who's driving is like the future or the present you at the very least, and not your 11-year-old self. Not that we don't love them. We're not trying to cast them out, but how can we work with this type of medicine? And I have found, and in my both personal journey and how it shifted me and pattern interrupt when I was really in heartache and grief, I have found that even in working with people now, I can see that there's this ability to not be stuck in the fear with all these protectors and all these constructs, but that we can actually open ourselves to the possibility of who we really are. And I tell my mom about the work that I'm doing now. I tell my family, I made a very clear choice to say, if I'm going to work in this space and support people who are taking these medicines, then I'm going to do it with like integrity, and I'm going to be, connected, and I'm going to share these stories with, I sent my mom the book called How to Change Your Mind by Pollen. There's a great book for anyone who's like wanting to get some more insight called Ecstasy as Medicine. It's a great just sort of overview on the therapeutic use of MDMA and why it can be so healing for people. It's not getting like a therapist or a good coach or someone who works in the way that I do, I think is really important. It's not something I would ever suggest people just go find their resource for medicine and take a bunch on their own.
Yeah.
Just doesn't work the same way as having someone there with you. But it's been a really beautiful opportunity and really rewarding work to be a part of someone's process of healing. And it also is it's a relationship you need to be like whoever the end user is needs to feel really safe about, just meaning who they are with, because
Hmm.
this is the person that's going to share stories that's going to certainly, like, I help my clients integrate anywhere from 2 to 8 weeks after. I want people to do integration work, and I'm having calls with them to make sure that they're actually making choices that are good for themselves and lifestyle changes that they say they want to make, right? I want to expand in this direction, and I want to take these other parts and just like keep them with me in the car, but don't let them drive it.
Yeah. So talk
Yeah.
us through a ceremony, like for our listeners, is it because we've sat in a lot of ceremonies and this is obviously a little
Yeah.
bit different. So you're playing music, you're in a soft container. Is it like
Yeah.
closing the eyes and is it a close eye thing and journey with music and just
It's
see
a great question. Yeah,
yeah.
these are great questions because we know the dawn of, and I'm certainly not a curandero or someone who serves ayahuasca who's been trained in the Amazonian forest, and that's not something for me to do. But like I've chosen not to do that. Anyone who wants to do that and train that way is more than welcome to. And I think that medicine can be valuable. But what I see a lot, and in living in Austin, Texas, and traveling around, North America doing this work, is I see a lot of people going to various different plant medicines or ayahuasca or molecules or chemicals like this and saying, oh, okay, I went 13 times this year to go do this thing. And then they come back and they're not taking any time to actually do. If the medicine opens the door to the actual work being done, then if you only take the medicine and don't do anything else, all you do is stand in the doorway of your change, of your possibility, of your future greatest self. And so, how do we get people to understand that the integration is not optional, that it's a very critical part? I know it's not the sexiest part of the experience. So, when I sit with people before I even, it's not the sexiest part, it's the work, people. It's the understanding the amazing creature that you are. And it's like giving yourself credit for all of it, right? And calling on every single,
God, you've
interplanetary
got to save you.
guide to just be like, I'm here and I'm ready to step forward into my best self, right? Whatever that dimension is for you.
Yeah.
And but for me, I do a big intake process and a phone call with people and have a long conversation to make sure like what they're doing for accessing, medicine and how just making sure it's the right fit and they're not just
Hmm.
there to be like party. And then they either fly to my space in Austin or I fly to where they are. And then yeah, set a container is really important. So I want to make it feel, I can never decide that it's safe for them because I don't get to say what's safe for people. They need to tell me that they're safe. But I put on music, I make sure the lighting is appropriate. I set a space like, locks on doors, no one else is around, that it feels very grounded. And then we spend the time a little bit with eyes closed and letting the medicine take its effect. And then starting to call in different parts and stories. I find that the medicine quite often is doing some of the heavy lifting in the sense of somebody has thoughts when they clear away sort of the fear. They have thoughts and stories or visions from their past and their childhood that are things that are haunting them or that are sticky. And so we're trying they're already bubbled up to the surface, and then we get to do a lot of unpacking. So while I do breath work to ground people, to settle them in, to get rid of any anticipatory worry and all of that as they settle into the medicine, then we really begin the work. And so it's a solid 5 hours, and in some cases a little more, and with couples maybe even a little more if you know couples. But where I'm sitting there and we're actually having conversation, right? And I'm guiding conversation with some divining rods and where it feels like it wants to go and not letting people get off track too far, but letting them hone in on the actual work they need to do, which is like discovering the parts of themselves, a bit
Mm.
of this like reparenting energy or bringing the part and having a conversation with it, and really letting the people I work with, my clients, do the talking about coming to the realization, seeing where they have gaps or blind spots that need healing. And I take a lot of notes because, as you may remember from your younger years, sometimes when you're in the medicine like that, you don't remember everything that's coming out. So I
Mm.
take a ton of notes and then I share them in the integration when we first start integration, and it just really becomes a container for trust. And the thing I want to do is like love up on my clients so deeply that all of their, very private with the work that I do because it's people's life stories. I'm very discreet about it, but also I really want to be able to give people the best opportunity and share as a mirror back to them the things they're speaking into
Mm.
reality, help them integrate that over, like I said, 2 to 8 weeks after. And some clients have a lot more, show up with a lot more physical trauma or other things that they might want to unpack over a few sessions in the course of a 12-month span of time that they're putting a session in. But this is never the case where it's like every weekend I'm going to go do this. It's
No.
not that. It's really a big opportunity to have the moment of opening the door and then really to take all the lessons and all the learning and begin to apply them slowly so that we see just healing and change and growth and like vitality coming with people who have been stuck for a lot of years.
It's beautiful work that you're doing. It's just so fascinating and interesting that this medicine in particular, MDMA, is like popular and coming back around, but in a more
Mm.
healing way, like and so, is someone seeing visions like a psychedelic experience, or is it more just a knowing, memories, feeling?
Yeah, it's an empathogen, right? So it's really less about visuals, like if you're going to take LSD or something, and it's much more about heart opening. Like we use
Yeah.
that term a lot, but it is quite heart opening so that people are willing to share more and navigate through. And when I'm using IFS parts work, there are plenty of people that are stubborn and little parts of us that come up that are protecting and like unsure. And we learn to do the dance together in those moments and really speak to those parts sweetly and dearly and have the people speak to their own pieces of themselves. And the other thing I will say is like, yes, people are coming to unpack trauma. I think some of us feel like, I don't have trauma, I'm fine. But it doesn't have to be that you went off to war and you saw people get killed. It could be that at 3 years old, someone hit you in the face with a red shovel in the sandbox and it created this thing where you're like, oh, I don't trust people. I mean, it could be something as simple as that. Trauma is not what happens to us, it's what happens in the outside world and our experience of that thing. So it's different for everyone. And so I would encourage people to think about trauma in that way. I think that's an important piece. And then the other thing is, I had a call this morning with a woman who's going to do a session with me. And she's just like, I'm writing a book. I wrote this big medical article. I'm learning about myself, my memoir. And I really just want to step more into creativity. She's not to give too much information, but she's like a business person who's kind of alpha and like leading the way and leading the charge. And she's been through a lot of challenges over the course of COVID. And she's writing this big memoir. And when someone like that shows up, it's like they're less about, oh my goodness, I'm in a place of having to unpack my trauma and a dark night of the soul. And they're more like, I know that some of that's in there and I want to work through it, but I also want to step into a fuller expression of creativity. Right.
Mm.
And this is where sometimes the psilocybin like can come in because I always offer a little optional psilocybin, which doesn't provide a lot of visuals, but even in a recent post, if anyone's following, I'm a Kristen Weitzel official. I did a day of I did a microdose, and then I ended up writing myself a letter. It was like my future self writing a letter to my
Wow.
current self. And I had the crazy idea like 1 a.m. or something before I went to bed, like I'm just gonna write it up and post it. And then in the morning I woke up and I was like, what have I done? I just posted this whole personal thing. And I'm pretty into science. So a lot of my clients are like, okay, the Wooniverse is great. I'm woo adjacent. I'm like loving all these other things. But so I was like, some of my clients will get this, but what about the rest of the world? And to my surprise, in many ways, people were like, wow, this is amazing and interesting and thoughtful. And like I reread what I wrote and just decided, one of my best girlfriends was like, why would you take it down? It's really real. It's really you, and
Mm.
that post I've reread it a couple of times because it's the moments that we all have where we have a little imposter syndrome or a little self-doubt or a little bit of like, I'm not good enoughness. Then I can read it and I can be reminded that my higher self, my higher power, whatever people want to call it, has spoken to me in a way to remind me to be soft, to be confident, to not forget about being kind to myself, all the things that you need. And so there is some magic within these, pun intended, these medicines. And I don't know if I would have bridged the gap as easily in my own personal and professional work if I hadn't gone through these things myself. And now I get to bring them to clients, whether it's working outside of medicine with breath and cold, because we all know in breath work you can have transformation, big transformation, or it's weaving in these kinds of medicines where people are like, hey, I would love someone to guide me through this process and share and coach and hold a safe container, which is like ultimately the most important thing for us to feel like we can unpack like the truest, most beautiful version of who we are.
And, I really feel like we're all very sensitive. So the ego is blocking us and pretending that nothing's wrong with us. And sometimes you think, oh, I don't think that person was accurate with what she told me, maybe channeling or healing. And then like 2 months later, you're like, I think she was right because the ego's like stepping aside. And, we're very sensitive. We're all very delicate. We're energy. And, right
Mhm.
now, a lot of the planet's concrete. And that's okay because there's jackhammers and we can break that down with these beautiful modalities. But it's like, one thing that affected us, like the sandpit analogy that you just gave before, could have such a deep impact on us that we have no idea. And we think it's nothing. And we think everything is nothing, but everything is something in a negative, or
Mhm.
it's a beautiful learning. It's a beautiful unraveling of elevation. They're catalysts for growth. So something that could have been the worst thing in your life is actually the biggest thing that's going to grow you and move you up and raise your vibration and expand your
Mhm.
consciousness. But it's just the
Yeah.
state of consciousness that you're looking at it from, what perception you're looking at it, perspective you're looking at it from. and what
Yeah.
consciousness is available to you in that moment, right? And so for you, you did that beautiful post, and all of a sudden you got all this nerves because it's almost like bringing a toy to show and tell at class, and everyone
Yeah.
you're about to get it out of your bag, and you're like, "Oh no, I don't think this is like my teddy." Everyone's got like cool stuff from there, and then you're like, "No, I forgot my show and tell." And it's like that self-conscious of not fitting in, but that's the beautiful, authentic self that is higher than love on the David Hawkins consciousness scale, right?
Uh-huh.
It's like
Yeah.
you were had a glimpse of your authentic self, and that's what we all need to be, not a copy of and paste of, a Barbie or a Ken up the road, on social media that we're all trying to strive towards. I mean,
Yeah.
the multi-complex human and the authentic uniqueness is beautiful. And so I
Yeah.
love that you shared that. That's beautiful for you to have that realization and to keep doing more of it because that's what we want, the different.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what I'm always, I'm just amazed repeatedly, when I'll work with people and I'll say to them, like, well, what is your higher self calling in about your leadership? Let's say it's someone who owns a big company. Or what is your higher self calling in about you in this book that you're writing?
Mm,
And they will speak to me. They will tell me, and I said earlier, I take feverish notes for people, and then I will go back to them in integration and say, "This is what you said," like word for word in many cases, especially when it's something very specific. I write down word for word, and they'll say, "I didn't say that." And I'm
yeah,
like, "You told me. I'm not channeling a different energy to give this to you. You told me this. Your higher power, your higher self, the state of being that you were in with no fear said this." And they're like, wow, like, oh, I was right, or I know that, or like that nugget is so important. And so that's like, again, it's like why weaving the pieces together and doing this in a therapeutic sense, I think is so powerful because our ego's working so hard to make us forget the good nuggets, you know?
totally, totally. I
Yeah.
like it. The
Yeah. So cool.
medicine's always giving me great ideas, and then I come back out, I'm like, ah, nah, the egos.
I'm not showing my teddy. I'm not showing
Yeah,
my teddy.
no teddy. So it's
Yeah.
been so good. Thank you for your insights on these three modalities. It's been so good to connect with you, and I'm sure we'll be connecting again soon with some work that we did last year to promote that. But where can everyone find you, and do you have any upcoming retreats or services that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, everyone can find me. I still answer my own DMs. I think that's important in this world in some way at Kristen Weitzel Official. I have sherpabreathandcold.com, which is all my instructor certifications, my breath and cold work. There's a new course coming out in the fall about navigating anxiousness and grief. And so I'm excited about sharing that. And then in October, we're putting the first Sherpa Breath and Cold online coach certification up. That's all online. I have been really wanting to stay in the live space, but now there's enough people from Australia, from Poland, from around the world that want to learn, and they're not willing to fly to Texas or Boston or wherever I am that weekend. So much coming down the pipeline. And if people want to get really curious, the super secret URL about working in the space with me as a coach for your medicine work is called theinner.quest. So I call that work the inner quest, and it's theinner.quest is where you can find it. It's not listed anywhere. You can Google. So it's only available here with me and Roxy sharing it to you. And I just want to say it's so lovely to see you. And I'm so thankful we could have this conversation. I knew it just felt really timely, but also I felt so connected to you in California and the work that you and Pete are doing. So it's just beautiful to have time together.
Thank you. And likewise, you're a beautiful soul. Thank you for your service. And we do actually wish you all the many blessings of abundance and joy and love on your path. You deserve it.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, more soon.
Thank you.